A jagged fissure of pale skin, starting near Alara's temple and cutting sharply down to her jaw, was the scar that drew every eye, a bright stream across a darker landscape that invariably caused strangers to avert their gaze. Years had passed since she last cared to count the craned necks or entertain the futile hope that the hushed whispers would finally cease. This evening she pulled her hood lower and traversed the night market with the stealth of a phantom, choosing to be unseen rather than being cursed by invisibility. The market itself was a vast sprawl within the ancient district of Ashnir, where the meager glow of gas lamps created deep pockets of shadow, and the air hung thick with the scent of wet stone and fermenting fruit. Era hugged the periphery, her woven basket empty, her coin purse disappointingly light. Her presence here was not driven by a need to purchase anything. She had come because her boarding house felt oppressively confined, eerily silent, and overwhelmed by the specters of the life she had abandoned. 3 months had elapsed since the fire. 3 months since Marcus had looked upon her ruined face and determined that the boundaries of his affection were finite. She instinctively brushed the scar, a movement she immediately checked. The action had become an ingrained habit, a confirmation, a reminder, a perpetual check of the damage. A perfect night for the Forsaken, wouldn't you agree? The voice was low and smoky, emerging from directly behind her. Era spun around, her heart pounding a fierce rhythm, to find herself face to face with a man who was utterly out of place in this derelict quarter. His coat was too luxurious, his posture too deliberately controlled, his face too classically beautiful to appear genuine. Dark hair fell across his forehead with what looked like calculated indifference. When his eyes caught the lamplight, they returned a strange, unnatural brilliance, too luminous, too unmoving, like perfectly polished stones resting at the bottom of a deep well. "I am not forsaken," Era retorted, despising the tremor in her voice. "I'm standing right here. Are you?" He inclined his head, subjecting her to a penetrating stare that made her skin tingle. "You navigate this space as if you owe the world an apology for your existence, as though you believe yourself unseen. Perhaps I prefer it that way. Liar." The word was devoid of malice, uttered only with absolute certainty. He took a step forward, and she noticed the impossible. Despite being positioned directly under a gas lamp, he cast no shadow. Her breath hitched. Impossible. A mere trick of the light, she insisted internally. Before she could retreat, a cacophony of shouts erupted from the market's far end. The crowd surged in a wave of panic, bodies crushing together. Alara heard the word vampire hissed, passed from one terrified mouth to the next like a lethal curse. Her blood turned instantly to ice. Everyone knew the tales, the powerful great houses that governed from their remote estates outside the city walls, the blood oaths that shackled generations of servant families, the shadowy night courts where immortal lords settled grievances through brutal games and summary executions. Yet vampires did not frequent common markets. They did not mingle with mortals unless they were hunting. "Run." The beautiful man's voice had sharpened, now ringing with undeniable command. She saw them then, slicing through the scattering people with unsettling, predatory grace. 3 figures draped in dark clothing, moving with impossible fluidity and speed. One of them locked eyes with her, and she glimpsed a raw hunger that transcended a simple thirst for blood. "She's marked," one of them bellowed, pointing directly at Era. "House Caris laid claim to her yesterday. The blood seal is fresh." Era instinctively touched her neck, feeling only the frantic thump of her own pulse beneath her fingers. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The beautiful man moved with impossible swiftness. 1 second he was beside her. The next he had positioned himself between her and the advancing vampires, his body a solid barrier of barely contained violence. "House Caris holds no authority here. This is neutral ground." "She carries the mark," the lead vampire snarled. "We can smell it." "Then your senses are as dull as your intellect. The girl is under my protection." He delivered the words like a sacred invocation. Alara felt a tangible shift in the air, a heavy pressure like storm clouds rapidly converging overhead. "Do you truly dare to invoke blood right, Cassian?" The vampire's voice was heavy with contempt. "After everything House Vale inflicted upon ours? After the purge?" "Cassian." The name meant nothing to Alara, but it clearly struck a nerve with the attackers. The 3 vampires halted, pulling back not in surrender but in cautious reassessment, beginning to circle like wolves surrounding an injured quarry. "I dare far more than that," Cassian replied softly, too softly. "Test me." The marketplace had been utterly evacuated, with vendors and customers alike having vanished down side streets and into bolted shops. Era stood immobile, her back pressed against a wall, watching three immortal predators square off against one. The mathematics did not bode well for their safety or hers. The lead vampire lunged. Cassian moved like flowing water, like a gust of wind, impossibly fast. His hand intercepted the attacker mid-leap, seizing his throat, and slammed him into the cobblestones with force enough to crack the ancient stone. The other two simultaneously attacked from opposite sides, and Era saw the flash of blades. Not ordinary steel, but a darker metal that seemed to absorb the lamplight. Blood spattered. Not vampire blood, Era knew with chilling certainty, it was her own. One of the attackers had grabbed her, using her as a shield, and the knife pressed against her throat felt searingly cold. "Withdraw your claim, Cassian," the vampire hissed against her ear, "or I will slit her throat and let House Caris clean up the mess." Cassian went absolutely, terrifyingly still, in a way no living being should ever be able to. His eyes found hers across the intervening space, and she saw a flicker in their depths. Was it recognition or regret? She couldn't tell. "Release her," Cassian commanded, his voice returning to that quiet, dangerous register. "She is mortal. She does not comprehend the stakes here. This conflict is between our houses. Then you should not have claimed her." The blade bit deeper, and she felt a rivulet of warmth tracing down her neck. Her old scar throbbed in response, the new pain echoing the old. She did not allow herself to think. Thinking would have paralyzed her. Instead, she drove her elbow backward into her captor's ribs, putting all her weight behind the strike. The vampire barely reacted, but his grip loosened just enough. Era twisted, dropped low, and scrambled away on her hands and knees across the blood-slick cobblestones. The world erupted into pure violence. Cassian was on the vampire before she could draw a proper breath, moving with a savagery that made their initial skirmish look like a formal dance. She heard bones breaking, heard screams that sounded profoundly inhuman, and felt the frantic thunder of her own pulse deafening her. Clutching her hand to her bleeding throat, she watched Cassian tear through the two remaining vampires as if they were constructed of flimsy paper. The third one fled. Cassian simply watched him go. Then he was towering over her, breathing heavily, though she suspected he had no actual need to breathe, with blood on his hands and a look of murder in his eyes. For a terrifying instant, she was convinced she had only exchanged one certain death for another. "You are bleeding," Cassian stated, just that, as if the observation held all the necessary explanation. "I'll survive," she managed. Her voice sounded distant, as if delivered from a dream. "Shock most likely." She had studied the effects of shock in the medical texts she'd read before the fire, before Marcus, before the total collapse of her life. "Yes," Cassian agreed, and something in his tone compelled her to look up. "You will, but not here. Not tonight. They will return, and they will bring greater numbers. House Caris does not tolerate such an insult. And you just became the insult." He extended a hand, which was now inexplicably clean, though she'd just seen it drenched in blood moments ago. Alara stared at his hand, at him, at the deserted marketplace, and at the two bodies that were already dissolving into ash. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Someone who has just made a profoundly dangerous promise on your behalf." His mouth twisted into a shape that might have been a smile if it hadn't resembled a fresh wound. "And someone who is about to compound that mistake by taking you somewhere safe." "I don't even know you." "No," Cassian conceded. "But you are bleeding from a wound inflicted in a house feud, which means by ancient law, you are entitled to sanctuary until the blood debt is settled. I am offering that sanctuary. You may accept or you may test your chances against Caris assassins. The choice is yours." It was not a choice at all. Era took his hand. His skin was cold, not unpleasantly so but fundamentally wrong, the temperature of winter marble. His fingers closed around hers with unexpected gentleness. "What is your name?" he asked as he drew her to her feet. "Era." The name felt foreign on her tongue, like introducing an individual she used to be. "Era Thorn." Cassian maintained his grip on her hand, leading her toward a narrow passageway she had never noticed before. "Welcome to the world behind the world," he said. "Try not to expire in the next hour. It would make things considerably more complex." A carriage as black as a starless void and pulled by horses whose silence suggested they were anything but living, materialized out of the night. Era sat rigidly on the velvet cushion, one hand still covering the minor laceration on her neck, observing Cassian in the faint interior light. He occupied the seat opposite her, maintaining his signature, unnatural stillness, his gaze fixed on something beyond the window glass. "Are you not going to explain?" Era finally asked, her voice tight. She cleared her throat and tried again. What just happened back there? What am I marked with? What is House Caris? All excellent questions requiring complex answers, Cassian replied. His eyes finally shifted to her, and in the confined space of the carriage, his inherent wrongness was starkly apparent. Too pale, too flawless, too utterly still. The short version, he continued, is this. Vampire society is structured into houses, ancient families bound by blood and solemn oath. House Caris is one of the 7 reigning families. They have been aggressively expanding their domain, claiming mortals through blood marks, a type of ownership that predates all written statutes. Ownership, Era repeated, the word sour and metallic on her tongue. In practice, yes, it's a form of slavery, although they cloak it in sweeter terms: protection, patronage, service. His mouth curved into a bitter, fleeting expression. The old ways are returning. We enjoyed 2 centuries of relative peace, a shaky coexistence. That era is drawing to a close. The carriage jolted over uneven stones, steadily ascending. Era caught glimpses of narrow alleys giving way to wide boulevards, which soon led to towering walls and gates. And you? What house are you? House Vale, or what remains of it? He spoke with an unsettling lack of emotion, yet she sensed the profound weight beneath his words. We were the 6th great house until 15 years ago. We backed the losing side in a succession dispute, and House Caris spearheaded the subsequent purge. 300 vampires were executed in a single night. Blood oaths were shattered, our very name erased from the archives. But you survived. I was absent, he said. Simple words that held an ocean of guilt. By the time I returned, my house was dust. My entire family gone. I have spent 15 years in the shadows, focused only on staying alive, keeping out of sight. And then, tonight, I shattered every single rule I've followed to keep breathing. He leaned forward slightly, and the lamplight briefly illuminated his eyes, turning them a piercing silver. Because some fool from House Caris decided to place their mark on a mortal girl inside a neutral market, which contravenes 3 separate treaties. And when they came to claim her, I simply couldn't. He trailed off, pulling back, his hands clenching into fists upon his knees. Couldn't what? Era asked gently. Couldn't allow them to take you. The admission appeared to be physically costly. I don't know the reason why. I should have walked away. Should have let the courts resolve the matter through the proper channels. But I looked at you and I. He shook his head sharply. It is irrelevant now. What matters is that I invoked blood right, which means, by the ancient code, you are now under the protection of House Vale until this conflict is resolved. But House Vale no longer exists. Precisely. Cassian offered a mirthless smile. Which makes this entire situation legally fascinating and practically suicidal. The carriage drew to a halt. Through the window, Era saw massive iron gates swinging open onto a lengthy drive bordered by desolate, skeletal trees. At the drive's conclusion, an edifice stood silhouetted against the night sky, an estate rising like a specter from a ghost story. It was a sprawling mass of Gothic towers, crumbling masonry, and windows as dark and lifeless as blind eyes. Is this your home? She asked. This is where I conceal myself, Cassian corrected. He opened the carriage door and stepped out, then extended his hand once more. Era hesitated for only a second before taking it. The night air was sharp against her face, carrying the scent of aging roses and ancient, cold earth. As they walked, the house felt utterly abandoned. No lights shone in the windows, no servants rushed out for greetings, only silence, shadow, and the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel. Era instinctively tightened her cloak, intensely aware of their isolation. I should inform you, Cassian said as he unlocked the massive front door of black wood and wrought iron. I reside here alone. I've done for years. There's no staff, no guards, only myself and far too many empty rooms. He pushed the door inward, and the air that greeted them smelled of dust, decaying leather-bound books, and something metallic. If that makes you uneasy, I can arrange other lodgings, but they will not be as secure. Era thought of her tiny room in the boarding house, the landlady who avoided her gaze after Marcus left. She recalled the night market and the freezing knife edge at her throat. How long must I remain here? Until the blood debt is settled, or until House Caris officially retracts their claim. He lit a lantern with a match that flared too brightly. It could be days, months, or potentially never, if they decide to prioritize house honor over legal precedent. And if I leave before then? They will kill you, he stated flatly without a hint of drama. The mark they attempted to place in their eyes makes you their property. I disrupted the ritual, but the intent remains. They will hunt you until they possess you or until you are dead. Those are the only two outcomes they acknowledge. Era's legs suddenly felt weak. She leaned heavily against the doorframe, the full weight of her situation finally crushing through the barrier of shock. I don't understand any of this. I'm a nobody. Why would they even want to mark me? Cassian was silent for a prolonged moment. May I examine your neck? The location of the cut. Era lowered her hand from her throat. The bleeding had stopped, but the faint sting persisted. Cassian approached slowly, his movements deliberate, like someone trying not to startle a skittish creature. He gently lifted her chin with his fingers, inspecting the wound in the lamplight. He caught his breath. It wasn't much, just a small hesitation that could have been meaningless, but his eyes widened. For the first time since she had met him, he looked genuinely shaken. What is it? Era demanded. What did you see? You are not nobody, Cassian said quietly. You are blood-marked, yes, but not by House Caris. He traced the air just above her old scar, his finger following its jagged path without touching. This scar? How did you acquire it? A fire 3 months ago. And before the fire, did anyone ever suggest you possessed old blood? A heritage linked to the founding families. Era shook her head. My parents died young. I was raised in the city orphanage. No family history, no records. Why? Cassian stepped back, running a hand through his hair, the most truly human gesture she had yet witnessed from him. Because this scar is more than just damage. It is a blood seal. Ancient magic. The kind that identifies someone as belonging to one of the original bloodlines. The families that existed before the houses, before the turning, when humans and vampires shared power equally. He let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. House Caris didn't mark you tonight. They attempted to claim you. There is a critical difference. They must have discovered your lineage and moved to bind you before anyone else could. What I am. Era's voice rose sharply. I am a seamstress. I have no power, no wealth, no. You possess blood that remembers a time when humans commanded vampires to kneel, Cassian interrupted, his intense eyes burning into hers. That is why they desire you. That is why I cannot surrender you. Because if House Caris gains control of someone with founder blood, they will use you to legitimize their power grab. They will bind you, break you, and transform you into a symbol of human subservience. The words hung in the dusty entrance hall, leaving Era dizzy and unmoored. This is insane. You're insane. I need to go home. Home to what? Cassian asked, his tone devoid of cruelty. The life where everyone avoids looking at your face? Where your fiancé abandoned you because you were no longer flawless? Where you toil for pennies and pretend you aren't slowly drowning? He shook his head. I know this is terrifying. I know you never asked for this, but you stumbled into a situation tonight that is larger than both of us, and the only way forward is through. Era wanted to argue, wanted desperately to flee, but exhaustion crashed over her like a heavy wave, and her knees buckled. Cassian caught her before she could fall, his arms strong, steady, and impossibly cold. I have you, he murmured, and despite the insanity of the moment, Era believed him. He carried her through the dark house, up a grand staircase thick with dust, to a room that may once have been opulent. Now it was simply clean and cold, with a bed made up with fresh linen and a fire laid in the hearth. Rest, Cassian instructed, setting her down with surprising gentleness. We will determine the rest tomorrow. Where will you be? Era asked, hating the smallness of her own voice. Nearby. Vampires do not sleep as humans do, but I will rest. He walked toward the door, then paused. Era, lock this door after I leave. Do not open it for anyone but me. The house is warded, but wards can be broken. How will I know it's you? He smiled, and for an instant he looked almost human. Almost. I will speak your name 3 times. Old magic. True names possess power. That is another thing your blood should remember. Then he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Era stared at it for a long moment before stumbling over to turn the lock. The resulting click was loud in the profound silence. She surveyed the room, the faded wallpaper, the heavy drapes, the mirror that showed her reflection. A scarred girl in a ripped cloak, standing in a vampire's mansion, marked by magic she could not comprehend. Outside, the night pressed menacingly against the windows. And somewhere in that darkness, Era knew, House Caris was already beginning their hunt. Alara awoke to a silence so absolute it felt suffocating. There was no familiar noise of the streets, no sounds from neighboring homes, and no waking clatter of the boarding house environment. Just an oppressive stillness and the pale gray light of early morning that filtered through the thick window hangings. For a fleeting moment, she believed the night's events had been nothing more than a bad dream. Then she pushed herself upright, and the faint, dull ache on her neck, where the vampire's blade had briefly rested, reminded her of reality. She touched the wound, now painful but already shallowly scabbing, and the memories flooded back. The market, the assault, Cassian. Still clad in yesterday's attire, she climbed out of bed and found a wash basin on the dresser containing fresh water. Someone had been inside her room while she slept. The thought should have instilled panic, but she was too profoundly exhausted for any fresh surge of fear. She washed her face and hands, examining her reflection in the mirror. The scar looked darker this morning, more intensely red. She traced its path, pondering Cassian's assertions. Blood seal. Old magic. Found her blood. It had to be impossible. She was a nobody. She had always been a nobody. A quiet rap on the door made her jump. Thorn. Era Thorn. Alara Thorn. Cassian's voice was low and distinct. True names have power, he had said. She unbolted the door. He stood in the hallway, an exact replica of the man from last night. Same clothing, same impossible perfection, same unnatural calmness. Of course. Vampires did not sleep, did not change, did not age. I brought breakfast, he announced, indicating a tray set upon a nearby table. Such as it is. I don't maintain a large supply of human provisions, but there is some bread, cheese, and a bit of fruit that might still be palatable. Era's stomach let out a loud protest. She couldn't recall her last meal. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Cassian carried the tray into her room, placing it on a small table by the window. We must discuss the immediate future. Era sat down and hesitantly broke off a piece of the bread. It was surprisingly fresh, still faintly warm. Where did you acquire this? The village. They are accustomed to my presence. He settled into a chair across from her with the precise control of someone who is perpetually conscious of their own formidable strength. I have resided here long enough that I am considered merely eccentric rather than an outright threat. I compensate them well. I create no problems. They refrain from asking questions. Do they understand what you are? They suspect. The older families recall the houses. They remember the era preceding the purge. But an unspoken agreement exists. I leave them in peace. They leave me in peace. He watched her eat with an intensity that made her self-conscious. I must properly examine your scar. In daylight, if it is indeed a founder mark, there will be discernible indicators, patterns woven into the tissue, ancient script inscribed within the scarring itself. Era's hand instinctively flew to her face in a defensive gesture. It's nothing more than a burn. Indulge me. She wanted to refuse. The scar was hideous, a symbol of shame, a constant reminder of every loss she had endured. But there was a look of quiet desperation in Cassian's eyes, and she slowly dropped her hand. He rose and approached at a measured pace, then knelt beside her chair so that they were level. At this proximity she could observe his extraordinary detail. His skin utterly smooth like porcelain without a single pore or flaw. He looked not directly at her, but at the scar, as if it were a complex document he was striving to decipher. May I? He raised one hand, palm upward, a gesture of request. Something in Alara's chest relaxed at the unexpected courtesy. Yes. His fingers touched her face with the delicacy of a butterfly, lightly tracing the scar's trajectory from her temple to her jaw. His skin was cool, though not unpleasant, and his touch was so meticulously gentle that it constricted her throat. No one had touched her face since the fire, not even Marcus in those terrible final days. Extraordinary, Cassian murmured, his eyes distant, intensely focused. The pattern is there, concealed within the tissue. Observe. He carefully turned her face toward the window light. These curving lines within the scar, that is the old script, the pre-house language. And here, near the temple, this spiral, that is a founder mark, the seal of the bloodlines who forged the original accords with my kind. I don't see anything, Era whispered. It is merely damage to human eyes. Yes. But vampire sight penetrates deeper. We perceive the magic written into the flesh. The odes carved into the bone. His thumb gently brushed the spiral pattern she could not perceive, and his voice softened. You are descended from the founding 12. The families who first learned how to temper the nature of the vampire. Who established the blood oaths and taught us the ways of civilization. Your blood remembers every compact, every promise, every law inscribed in the ancient era. He drew back, his expression troubled. House Caris would murder for possession of you. Literally. They would drain you, preserve your blood, and use it to validate their claim to dominion over all other houses. Era shoved back from the table, the bread forgotten. So what am I expected to do? Hide here indefinitely? No. Cassian stood, pacing to the window. We need to take this to the Night Court. Force House Caris to justify their attempted claim in front of the other houses. If we can prove they violated neutral territory and tried to bind you without your consent, they will be compelled to withdraw. The old laws are strict on that matter. He turned back to her and she saw cold calculation in his eyes. But there is a complication. For me to bring a case to the Night Court, I require standing, legal recognition as a House Lord, which I haven't held since the Purge. So, we can't go to this court. I didn't say that. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. There is an option. An old law rarely invoked. If a vampire without house standing takes a mortal under protection, and that mortal possesses founder blood, the vampire can petition for house restoration, albeit temporary, solely for the duration of the legal challenge. It would grant us the standing we require. Era stared at him. You want to rebuild House Vale just for this? I want to keep you alive, Cassian corrected. House restoration is merely the instrument. But yes, in essence, I'm asking you to help me reconstruct what was obliterated, even if it is only a temporary facade, a matter of bureaucracy and protocol. It would furnish us with tools House Caris cannot easily overcome. She knew she should refuse. Should escape this madness entirely. But she remembered the vampire's knife, the cold conviction in his eyes. House Caris would not desist, and she truly had nowhere else to go. What would I be required to do? She asked quietly. Enter into a blood oath with me. Not a binding one, nothing that would strip your will or your freedom. Simply a formal partnership recognized by the law. You would officially fall under House Vale's protection, and I would be bound to guarantee your safety. He held her gaze. It would tie us together, Era. Your destiny to mine. That is a momentous commitment. And if I refuse? Then I will employ every resource I have to protect you regardless. But our options will be severely curtailed. He moved closer and she glimpsed something raw and exposed in his expression. I will not compel you. I will not deceive you. That is not my way. But you must grasp this. House Caris will not cease hunting you. The mark is incomplete, which makes you a loose end. They will dispatch assassins until you are dead or claimed. Those are your only alternatives if you run. Era looked down at her hands, at the calluses from years of needlework, at the scars from a life lived hard. She had survived the fire. Survived Marcus's betrayal. Survived 3 months of loneliness so profound it felt like drowning. Perhaps it was time to stop merely surviving. This blood oath, she said slowly. Tell me precisely what it entails. No flowery language. Just the truth. Cassian's eyes softened. Fair enough. The oath would establish a bond between us, a semi-permanent magical connection. I would be able to perceive your emotional state, know if you are in immediate danger or distress. You would receive some of that from me as well, though less intensely. The bond would endure until the legal matter is resolved, or until we formally dissolve it, which requires specific rites. Would you be able to control me? No. That is not the function of founder blood oaths. They are partnerships, not instruments of enslavement. The old families designed them that way deliberately. Humans held the blood magic. Vampires held the strength. Neither could subjugate the other. Would I have to feed you? The words tasted alien. Not in the manner you are imagining. Cassian's voice remained steady, clinical. Blood oaths necessitate a minor exchange at their inception. A few drops mingled and shared. After that, no. I have other sources. I will not take from you unless you offer freely, and I will never pressure you into feeling obligated. Era desperately wanted to believe him. She had trusted Marcus too, and look where that had ended. As if sensing her uncertainty, Cassian added quietly, I know you have been wounded. I know that trust does not come easily now. I'm not asking for your complete trust. Just enough to take this initial step. After that, you are free every single day to decide whether to stay or to leave. The oath binds me to protect you. It binds you to nothing but your own survival. Outside, a distant clock tower chimed 9. Morning was deepening toward day. Era thought about the boarding house, her empty room, the life that had become a slow, painful process of disappearing. All right, she said. Show me how it is done. The ritual chamber was deep within the estate's foundations, accessed by descending several staircases and passing through a door that appeared untouched for decades. Cassian led the way with a lantern that cast erratic, flickering shadows against the stone walls, and Era followed, her heart beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was my family's inner sanctuary, Cassian's voice echoed in the narrow stairwell. It is where we conducted house affairs, settled complex disputes, and swore binding vows. It has been vacant since the massacre, yet the wards still hold strong. Nothing can interfere with us here. The room at the bottom was circular, hewn directly from the natural bedrock. Ancient glyphs covered the walls, spirals and complex sigils that were painful to look at directly, as if their geometry existed in more dimensions than her eyes could process. In the center stood a heavy table of black stone, upon which rested a silver bowl and two small, elaborately carved knives. Era stopped at the entrance. This looks like a setting ripped straight from a nightmare. It is older than nightmares, Cassian said, his voice imbued with a mixture of reverence and the very fear that made her skin prickle. The founders constructed these sanctuaries. Human magic and vampire craft intricately merged. The oaths sworn here cannot be broken by falsehoods or treachery, only by death or formal dissolution. Comforting, she muttered. He offered a slight, acknowledging smile. You are not obligated to proceed. We can attempt to devise an alternative solution. But both of them understood that truly there was no other viable path. Era stepped fully into the room, and the heavy door swung shut behind her with a sound of finality. Guide me through it, she commanded, feeling a quiet pride that her voice remained steady. I want to understand every single step I am agreeing to. Cassian moved to the table, his actions meticulous. First, we each make a minor cut. Palm or wrist, you decide. The blood is collected into the bowl. Next, we recite the words of binding, the ancient formula. As we speak, we mingle the blood with our hands, forging the physical connection. Finally, we each take a single drop of the mixed blood onto our tongues. That seals the oath. And then? Then you will feel it, he said. A warmth in your core, a sensation of tension like a thread suddenly pulled taut. It will subside after a few hours, but the connection will endure. He selected one of the knives, carefully testing the edge with his thumb. It sliced his skin without resistance, and his blood, a shade darker than human, almost black, instantly pooled. The pain will be fleeting, I assure you. Era approached the table. Close up, she could see the silver bowl was etched with more of the impossible, spiraling symbols, drawing inward to the core. What is the consequence if I break the oath? You cannot, he corrected. Not in the conventional sense. The oath does not dictate your actions. You are free to depart, to refuse my requests, to change your mind about anything. However, the magical bond remains until formally dissolved. If you attempt to flee House Caris without my protection, the bond will pull at you. It will cause discomfort, not pain but a deep, constant awareness. A reminder that you are tethered to something greater than yourself. That sounds suspiciously like a leash. It is not. Cassian set the knife down and looked directly into her eyes. I understand how it sounds, but the founders engineered these oaths specifically to preclude mistreatment. The bond is reciprocal. I will perceive your distress, your terror, your rage. If I were to harm you, I would simultaneously harm myself. If I betray you, the oath will consume me from the inside out. That is the check on my power. That is why the founder blood oaths were the cornerstone of the old peace. Era studied his face, searching for any hint of deceit. Instead, she found a weary honesty in something else, a loneliness so profound it brought an ache to her own chest. Very well, she said. Let us proceed before my courage fails. Cassian handed her the second knife. Palm or wrist? Palm. She had already ruined her face. Her hands might as well match. They stood on opposite sides of the black stone table. Era pressed the blade against her palm, feeling the keen edge, the impending rush of pain. She had endured fire. This was negligible. She made the cut. The pain was immediate and sharp, and blood welled up faster than expected. She held her hand over the bowl, watching crimson droplets fall into the silver. Cassian cut his own palm, quick, decisive, and added his blood to hers. The red and near-black liquids merged in the bowl, swirling together, and Era swore she detected a faint light emanating from the surface, as if the blood itself were burning. Repeat after me, Cassian instructed. His voice had deepened, becoming richly resonant. He placed his bleeding palm over the bowl. Era matched the gesture, their hands hovering just inches apart. I offer blood to seal the ancient pact, Cassie began. I offer blood to seal the ancient pact, Era repeated, her voice echoing strangely in the circular room. I bind myself to this oath. Protection for loyalty, strength for trust, life for life, until the debt is settled. I bind myself to this oath. Protection for loyalty, strength for trust, life for life, until the debt is settled. The words felt weighty on her tongue, heavy with significance she couldn't grasp. Let the founders witness. Let the blood remember. Let the oath be sealed in flesh and spirit. Era repeated the final lines. Cassian plunged his hand into the bowl. She did the same, and their palms met in the mingled blood, his cold, hers warm, both slick and unifying. Cassian's fingers interlocked with hers, and Era felt a sensation like a lightning bolt, like a terrifying fall, like sudden flight. The room spun, the symbols on the walls blazed with light, and she heard a multitude of voices, thousands of them, whispering in forgotten tongues. The blood in the bowl appeared to boil, and she felt an intense heat surge up her arm, wrapping around her heart like a physical fist. Then it abruptly ceased. Cassian released her hand and raised the bowl. His eyes had turned completely black, the pupil indistinguishable from the iris. "One drop," he said, his voice seeming to travel from a great distance. "On the tongue to confirm what the blood has inscribed." He brought the bowl to his lips, took the tiniest sip, then extended it to Era. The liquid inside had stopped swirling. Now it was like shimmering liquid silver in the lamplight. Era accepted the bowl with trembling hands. "Don't think, just do it." She touched the rim to her lips and allowed a single drop to fall onto her tongue. The flavor was a complex mix of copper, ice, and something utterly ancient. The warmth in her chest erupted into a sudden, blinding heat, and she gasped, stumbling away from the table. Cassian caught her, stabilizing her, and she could feel him, not just his hands on her arms but his presence, like a secondary heartbeat thrumming beneath her own. "Easy," he murmured. "It will pass. Just focus on your breathing." Era obeyed. The intense heat diminished to a soothing warmth, which then became a gentle pressure behind her sternum. But the awareness remained. Cassian was there, intimately close. Not physically but present at the periphery of her consciousness. "Is this normal?" she managed. "Yes. The bond is setting. You will sense it most intensely for the first few hours. After that, it recedes into background noise unless one of us is in distress." He stepped back, providing her space, and she felt the distance like an elastic band being stretched between them. "How do you feel?" "Like I swallowed liquid starlight." The words emerged without conscious thought. Cassian laughed, a genuine, surprised, unreserved sound. "That is actually an excellent description." He glanced down at his palm. The cut had already healed, leaving only a thin white line. "We are now bound. House Vale lives again, at least formally. Tomorrow I will dispatch the message to the Night Court. They will issue the summons within the week." Era examined her own palm. The wound was still present, still bleeding sluggishly, but she could feel it knitting together faster than any normal human injury. "What do I do until then?" "You remain here. You must learn what you need to know to survive the court. They will attempt to test you, to break you, to expose any vulnerabilities. The other houses are rarely charitable toward mortals, even those with founder blood." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Alara, thank you for placing your trust in me for this." "I haven't yet decided if I trust you," Era admitted honestly. "But I trust that you need me alive. And right now that is enough." A complex emotion flickered across Cassian's face, hurt perhaps mixed with respect. It was gone before she could isolate it. "Fair enough. Come, you must eat something. Blood oaths deplete the living, and you need to maintain your strength." They ascended the stairs. Era was now acutely aware of how the bond allowed her to perceive Cassian's mood. A low hum of satisfaction mingled with distinct worry. It should have felt intrusive, but instead, it felt strangely comforting. She was not alone in her fear. He was afraid too. Back in the main house, morning had given way to afternoon. Cassian led her to a kitchen that looked perpetually frozen in time. Copper pots hanging on hooks, a massive hearth, windows overlooking an overgrown garden. He searched the cupboards and produced bread, hard cheese, and apples. "I will arrange for more provisions," he said, assembling a plate with unexpected domesticity. "And clothing. You require proper attire for the court, something that projects strength without arrogance." Era accepted the plate but held off on eating. "What is the court like?" Cassian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Imagine every terrible rumor you've heard about vampire society made manifest. 7 houses, each with its own territory, its own armies, its own ruthless agenda. They convene once a month to resolve conflicts, ratify treaties, and generally attempt to prevent outright war. It is held in the Undercoft, a vast cavern system beneath the old city. No sunlight, no possibility of escape, and no weapons permitted save those magically bonded to house lords." He smiled grimly. "It is part theater, part blood sport. You will be scrutinized, interrogated, potentially challenged. They need to verify if you are genuinely founder-blooded or if I am attempting a fraud. If they conclude you are not, they will likely kill you as a charlatan, and me for wasting their time. He stated this casually, but Era felt a sharp spike of anxiety through the bond that contradicted his detached tone. But I am founder-blooded, she insisted. The oath would not have bound otherwise. The magic knows. Era forced herself to take a bite of the bread. It tasted like dry dust, but she chewed and swallowed. Tell me about the houses. Who are they? What do they desire? Cassian settled into a chair across from her, and for the next hour, he painted a portrait of vampire civilization that was equally captivating and terrifying. 7 great houses, each designated by an ancient concept. Cass, signifying mortality, death. Mora, fate. Nyx, night. Erebus, shadow. Ananka, necessity. Chronos, time. And Vale, twilight. The space between light and dark. Mortal and immortal. We were the mediators, Cassian explained, his voice laced with old sorrow. The house that maintained the balance between humans and vampires. That upheld the founder oaths. That is why Caris desired our obliteration. They have aggressively advocated for absolute vampire supremacy for decades. They see humans as chattel, resources to be harvested, not partners to be respected. And the other houses permitted them to purge you? A few protested. Nyx and Erebus both spoke against it. But Caris held the majority and framed the execution as internal house justice. They claimed Vale had violated a sacred oath, abused sanctuary. It was a falsehood but a highly persuasive one. His hands clenched on the table. 300 vampires extinguished in a single night. My parents, my siblings, my cousins, the sworn servants, everyone who bore the Vale name. I was in the north, pursuing a rogue vampire who preyed on mortals. By the time I received the message and raced home, there was nothing left but ashes and accusations. Era reached across the table without deliberation and placed her hand over his. His skin was cold, but he did not withdraw. I am sorry. It happened a long time ago. Time doesn't make it hurt less, she said quietly. Just differently. Cassian looked down at her hand covering his, and something in his rigid composure fractured. No, it doesn't. He turned his hand palm up, and she felt the faint echo of the oath, the connection between them, humming like a plucked string. You comprehend that? Loss that changes its form but never truly departs. The fire, Era said softly. It didn't just claim my face. It took my future, everything I had envisioned, everyone I thought I would become. And then Marcus looked at me and couldn't see past the damage. She quickly pulled her hand back, suddenly self-conscious. Forgive me, you don't require my tale of woe. I want your story, Cassian insisted, the intensity in his eyes making her breath hitch. If we are bound, if we are going to face the court together, I need to understand you. Not just your bloodline but you. What motivates you? What terrifies you? What do you seek from a life that has just become unimaginably complicated? Era looked away toward the window and the overgrown garden beyond. I don't know what I want anymore. I used to want marriage, children, my own small shop, simple, humble aspirations. Now, she laughed bitterly, now I am blood-bound to a vampire, marked by incomprehensible magic, and apparently descended from people who forged pacts with immortal beings. I don't even know who I am. Then we will discover it together. Cassian stood and she felt his unwavering resolve through the bond, steady, determined, intensely protective. Starting with teaching you how to navigate the court without being executed. If Caris intends to challenge our claim, you must be capable of defending yourself. Not physically, they forbid mortal violence in the Undercoft. But verbally, intellectually. You must transform into someone they cannot effortlessly dismiss or destroy. And how do I accomplish that? Cassian smiled, and for the first time she saw a clear hint of the predator beneath the gentleman's veneer. By learning to think like a vampire. We have 3 days before the summons arrives. Let us make every one of them count. The library was an immense, forgotten space. 3 towering stories of shelving ascended toward a glass ceiling that admitted pale afternoon light. Motes of dust swirled in the air, and the scent of aged paper and dried ink filled Era's lungs as Cassian guided her through packed aisles of volumes and languages she did not recognize. House Vale amassed knowledge the way other houses amass territory, Cassian explained, his fingers brushing the book spines with the reverence one reserves for old friends. Treaties, histories, genealogies, everything necessary to comprehend vampire law and founder magic. It is all here, provided one knows where to seek it. He retrieved a massive tome bound in dark, worn leather and placed it on a reading table. When he opened it, Era saw pages covered in dense script, illuminated margins, and diagrams that seemed to ripple when she observed them directly. "This is the Codex Noctis," Cassian stated. "The foundational text of vampire law, composed in the first decade after the founding, when humans and vampires were still learning how to coexist. Every house lord is required to memorize significant passages. You must grasp at least the fundamental principles." Era stared at the pages. "I cannot read this. It is in no language I have ever encountered. It is written in Old Nocturnal, the original tongue of our culture. But look." He placed his hand over hers, directing her finger to a line of script. "The oath we undertook includes a language transfer. It is part of the bond. You can understand me when I speak Nocturnal, and you can read it, although it will require focused concentration initially." He was correct. As Era focused, the words seemed to writhe and reconfigure themselves, and a sudden meaning emerged, like the breaking of dawn. She read aloud, stumbling over the ancient pronunciation. "No vampire may claim a human without free consent. No human may bind a vampire without blood price paid. The first law," Cassian said, "the bedrock of everything. Consent above all else. That is precisely what renders Caris's attempted claiming unlawful. You never consented, and they tried to impose the mark by force. But don't vampires constantly take humans? Feed on them, kill them? Feeding and claiming are distinct. Feeding is complex. Some humans willingly consent, offering themselves for compensation or protection. Others are taken by rogues who disregard house law, and those rogues are hunted once found. But claiming, making a human a part of your house, binding them with magic, that explicitly requires consent. It always has." Era turned the page, her finger tracing the elaborate script. The subsequent section detailed blood oaths, their formation, dissolution, and the reciprocal rights and duties they conferred. She read for what felt like hours, with Cassian fielding questions, clarifying subtleties, and retrieving other texts as needed. She learned that founder-blooded humans were now scarce, their lineage diluted by centuries of intermingling with non-blooded families. She discovered that the original 12 families wielded a rare magic that could constrain vampires, enforce their adherence to oaths, and even annihilate them if they broke faith. She also learned that the purge of House Vale was not the first time a house had been obliterated, and likely would not be the last. "The system is fracturing," Cassian noted as twilight deepened outside. "The old laws were predicated on balance. Human magic checked vampire power. Vampire strength safeguarded human fragility. But human magic is waning. Most families have lost the knowledge, lost the bloodline. Without that natural check, vampires like Caris see no imperative to honor the ancient ways. They are attempting to seize full control before the balance completely collapses." "Exactly. And you," he tapped the page illustrating founder bloodline markers. "You represent the past they are desperate to erase. If you can stand before the court and prove your founder blood, prove that human magic persists, it utterly undermines their entire platform for supremacy." Era leaned back, her mind reeling. "No pressure then." Cassian's mouth twisted wryly. "The court will test you. They will demand you demonstrate your blood. This usually entails activating one of the founder talents: resistance to compulsion, oath sensing, or blood reading. Have you ever experienced anything like that? Moments where you could perceive lies, or where someone attempted to influence you and failed?" Era reflected on her life, 23 years of hardship, poverty, and relentless struggle for survival. "I don't believe so. I'm not special, Cassian. I'm just—" "Look at me," he commanded, and his voice acquired a strange, compelling quality, layered as if multiple voices were speaking in unified harmony. "Tell me you trust me completely. Say the words." Era opened her mouth. The words were there, ready to escape, and a part of her yearned to utter them. But that warm nucleus in her chest, the sight of the bond, pulled taut, and she found herself unable to speak. I can't." "That is compulsion resistance," Cassian stated, his voice instantly returning to normal. Relief surged through the bond. "I just attempted to compel you to speak against your will. Most humans cannot resist vampire compulsion. It is one of our most ancient talents. But you did. That is founder blood protecting you. You compelled me?" Anger flared hot and sharp. "Without asking? I asked you to display your talents. This was the most direct route," he said, raising his hands defensively. "I apologize. I should have explained first. But this is vital. The court will do far worse. They will try to break you, to force you to confess to fraud. You must know, absolutely, that you can withstand it. The anger receded, replaced by profound exhaustion. What else can I do? We will ascertain that tomorrow. But first you require rest. It is growing dark and you have been studying for hours. He stood, carefully closing the codex. Tomorrow we focus on court protocols, how to address the House Lords, how to manage challenges, how to survive when every being in the room either wants you dead or controlled. You certainly know how to motivate a girl. Cassian smiled, but the expression did not reach his eyes. I refuse to lie to you, Era. The court is inherently dangerous, particularly for humans. But you are not alone. The bond ensures I will know if you are in distress. I cannot always prevent harm, but I can intercede. And house law still holds significance for most of the lords. They will not kill you without due cause. How comforting, Era sighed, rising, her legs stiff from the prolonged sitting. The library now felt different, less like a tomb, more like an armory. Knowledge as a weapon. Cassian, why are you truly doing this? She asked. You could have simply walked away in the market. Let Caris take me. Remained hidden. He was silent for a long while, and through the bond she felt genuine confusion, as if he were asking the question of himself. I do not know, he finally admitted. When I saw you standing there, scarred, defiant, refusing to apologize for your existence, something inside me woke up. I have spent 15 years in the shadows, hiding, surviving, but never truly living. And then you appeared, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to have something worthy of protection. He met her gaze. Perhaps I am selfish. Perhaps I required you just as much as you needed rescuing. But whatever the reason, we are now in this together. Era studied his face, beautiful, inhuman, yet somehow sincere. Okay. Tomorrow you teach me how to survive your world. Tonight I sleep. Deal. Deal. They walked back through the darkening house together, the bond humming between them, not entirely comfortable, yet not entirely strange. Simply present, constant, a profound reminder that she was no longer isolated. The messenger arrived at midnight on the third day, precisely as Cassian had foreseen. Era was in the library poring over a text on court etiquette, when she felt it, a spike of intense alertness through the bond, sudden and sharp. Cassian materialized in the doorway moments later, moving with impossible vampire speed. Stay here, he instructed. Do not come down until I call for you. But Era was not easily swayed by orders. She marked her place, crept to the top of the grand staircase and listened. The front door opened. A rush of cold air poured in, bringing the scent of midwinter and something else, ancient magic, ozone, and blood. A voice spoke, neither distinctly male nor female, echoing with unnatural resonance. House Vale is summoned to the Night Court in 3 days' time to defend its claim of restoration. Failure to appear will result in the forfeiture of all rights and the immediate execution of the petitioner. I understand, Cassian replied, his voice meticulously neutral. House Vale will answer the summons. The mortal must come as well. The one bearing founder marks. She will be examined. She will come under my protection, with all rights accorded to a housebound human. A cold, star-like laughter echoed. If she survives the examination, perhaps. The court looks forward to testing young Vale's confidence. Pause. Tell me, Lord Cassian, do you truly believe you can restore what was destroyed? Your house perished with honor, but it perished. Some things should remain buried. Through the bond, Era felt Cassian's rage, controlled, banked, but intensely burning. House Vale lives as long as I draw breath. The court will acknowledge that, or they will explain why they fear one vampire and a mortal girl. Silence. 3 days. The Undercoft. Midnight. The front door closed with a sound like a coffin lid sealing. Era descended the stairs. Cassian stood in the entry hall, clutching a scroll sealed with black wax. His hands were shaking, subtly, but she could see it. You heard? He asked without turning. Most of it. Who was that? A court herald. A neutral party bound by oath to deliver summons impartially. The fact that they issued veiled threats means Caris has been spreading venom. They are trying to turn the other houses against us before we even arrive. He broke the seal and unrolled the scroll, rapidly scanning the contents. As expected, we are charged with unlawful house restoration, fraudulent blood claim, and, this is interesting, interference in lawful vampire business. Interference. I killed 2 of their operatives in the market. Cassian's smile was grim. They are twisting it into an unprovoked assault rather than self-defense. Clever. It puts us on the defensive immediately. Era sank onto the bottom step. 3 days. 72 hours until she walked into a room full of ancient vampires who desired her death or her subservience. Her hands felt numb. I am not prepared. You are more prepared than you realize. Cassian sat beside her, closer than he usually permitted, close enough that she could feel the cold emanating from his body. You have absorbed more court law in 3 days than most humans learn in a lifetime. You can resist compulsion. You have survived fire and betrayal. You are stronger than you know, Era. I am terrified, she whispered. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He turned to face her, and in the dim lamplight, his eyes appeared almost human. I will not allow them to hurt you. I know I have stated that before, but I need you to grasp this. The oath we swore binds my protection of you above all else, including my own survival. If it comes down to a choice between your life and mine, the magic will choose yours. That is the fundamental function of founder oaths. That is not comforting. It is not intended to be. It is intended to be true. He stood, offering his hand. Come. One final lesson before the court. Something I should have taught you first. He led her back down to the ritual chamber, the circular room deep beneath the house. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse in the lamplight, throbbing with a rhythm that mirrored her own heartbeat. When we swore the oath, I told you it was reciprocal, Cassian said, that I would feel your distress. But I did not tell you the full extent of the bond. Founder oaths do not merely connect emotions. They can share strength. If you are in peril and I am near enough, you can draw on my power. How? The bond is like a door between us. Right now it is sealed, but in a moment of extremity you can open it. Call for me through the connection and I will answer. He moved to the center of the room. Attempt it now. Reach for me through the bond. Era closed her eyes and focused on that warm space in her chest. She could sense Cassian there, a presence hovering at the edge of her consciousness. She pushed toward him mentally and coldness flooded her veins. A powerful strength surged through her muscles. Her senses intensified until she could hear Cassian's precise breathing, smell the ancient stone, and feel the vibrations of his heartbeat through the floor. It was equally intoxicating and terrifying. Now release it, Cassian said, his voice strained. Push it back to me. Era let go of the connection, and the borrowed power drained away, leaving her breathless. She opened her eyes to find Cassian steadying her, his hands on her shoulders. That is what you can access, he said. In the court, if someone attacks you and I cannot reach you physically, call for me in that way. It will not save you from everything, but it may buy you a few critical moments. It felt like drowning and flying simultaneously. Era managed. Vampire power through human veins. It is unnatural and it exacts a toll. Use it only out of desperate necessity. He released her shoulders but did not step back. They stood mere inches apart and she could feel the bond humming between them, stronger now, tested, undeniably real. Era, I must know. If the court offers you an alternative, if they say you can walk away free provided you dissolve the oath, will you accept it? She knew she should say yes, should snatch at any available escape route. But she looked at Cassian, ancient, deadly, lonely, and thought of the library, the ritual that had burned magic into her blood, the 3 days of lessons and measured respect. No, she said. We started this together. We finish it together. Something in Cassian's expression cracked, and for a fleeting moment she saw past the vampire to the man beneath, grieving, hoping, terrified of that very hope. Then we will face them as House Vale, he declared. Both of us. Both of us, Era agreed. The entry to the Undercoft lay concealed beneath a derelict church in the ancient quarter of Ashnear. Cassian guided Era down through the crypt, past burial vaults etched with unfamiliar names, toward a door that seemed composed of solid stone until he placed his palm upon it and uttered phrases in Old Nocturnal. The stone instantly dissolved, revealing a staircase that spiraled downward into an all-consuming darkness. Keep close, Cassian instructed in a low voice. He was now arrayed in formal wear, a coat of rich deep blue velvet embroidered with silver thread, signifying House Vale. His hair was meticulously styled back, highlighting the sharp, severe lines of his face, and he moved with a menacing grace that caused Era's pulse to quicken. She wore a dress he had arranged for, a midnight blue to complement his coat, with tailored sleeves and a high collar that concealed the scar on her throat. The fabric rustled with her movements, making her feel simultaneously potent and utterly exposed. They descended. The staircase seemed endless, winding deep into the earth. Era counted 500 steps before her mind lost track, her legs aching fiercely. Cassian, unaffected, maintained his inhumanly steady pace, showing no signs of fatigue or breathlessness. Finally they reached a wide landing. Two colossal doors stood before them, engraved with the sigils of all 7 houses. As they drew near, the doors swung inward, releasing a sudden wave of sound. Voices, laughter, the faint chime of glassware. Beyond lay the Undercoft. It was breathtakingly beautiful in a terrifying way, a sprawling cavern illuminated by thousands of floating ethereal lights. These were not mere lamps, but cold, magical witch-fire that cast absolutely no shadows. Over the centuries, the space had been meticulously carved and shaped, transforming it into a Gothic cathedral of vampire culture. Pillars, engraved with chronicles and laws, soared toward the roof of the cave. Tables were arranged in a vast circular formation, divided into 7 distinct sections, each marked by the banner of a different house. And everywhere there were vampires, hundreds of them exquisitely beautiful and palpably dangerous, adorned in centuries-spanning haute couture. As Cassian and Era entered, the general conversation instantly subsided into a torrent of whispers. "House Vale," someone announced, their voice carrying across the enormous space. "Lord Cassian Vale and his bound mortal, Alara Thorn." The whispers intensified, and Era felt the concentrated force of their scrutiny like a heavy, physical weight. Cassian's cold hand found hers, his fingers lacing with her warm ones, and she instantly felt his anchoring strength surge through the bond. "Steady. I am here." They proceeded into the circular gathering. 7 imposing thrones occupied the center, each holding a seated house lord. Era recognized them from her intense studies. Lady Moira of Fate, her silver hair intricately coiled, her eyes as black and vacant as deep space. Lord Nyx of Night, youthful in appearance but ancient in age, power radiating from him like oppressive heat. Lady Erebus of Shadow, terrifying in her beauty. Lord Ananke of Necessity, stern and marked by old scars. Lord Kronos of Time, who appeared thoroughly bored with his own immortality. And at the head, on the grandest throne, sat Lord Caris of Death. He defied her expectations. Where the others possessed an elegant beauty, Caris was handsome in a brutal, harsh way, with sharp features, dark skin, and eyes that radiated pure contempt. He was dressed in crimson and black, and when he smiled at Cassian, a shiver of ice shot down Era's spine. "Lord Cassian," Caris called out, his voice easily filling the cavern. "How marvelously nostalgic. I have not seen you since the evening we executed your entire family. You appear well. Hiding must agree with you." Cassian's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Era's, but his voice remained dangerously even. Lord Caris, still attempting to compensate for inadequacy with cruelty. "Some things, it seems, are perpetually unchanged." A dangerous ripple of laughter spread through the surrounding crowd. Caris's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Careful, little Vale. You are present here by sufferance, not by right. We have permitted this audience, but that does not guarantee we will tolerate your insolence." "You granted this audience because old law demands it," Cassian countered, his tone hardening. "I invoked blood right, claimed a founder-blooded mortal, and petitioned for house restoration. These are my rights under the Codex, or do you refute that?" "We refute nothing," Lady Moira interjected, her voice like silk drawn over razor-sharp steel. "But we question. House Vale was purged for breaking faith. What gives you the assurance that you can restore a name that has been utterly dishonored?" "House Vale was purged based on false accusations," Cassian stated. "Accusations that were never substantiated. Charges that were never defended in court. Caris engineered our downfall because we obstructed his expansionist ambitions. That was an act of murder, not justice." "Bold assertions," Lord Nyx noted, leaning forward. "But this is ancient history. What is relevant now is your claim. You maintain you have bound a founder-blooded mortal. Prove it." All eyes swung to Era. Her throat went instantly dry. This was the moment, everything depended on her. "My name is Alara Thorn," she stated, proud that her voice remained steady. "I bear the marks of the founding bloodlines. I offer myself as irrefutable evidence of House Vale's right to restoration." "Any common mortal can claim founder blood," Caris scoffed dismissively. "Show us. Demonstrate your power." Era took a step forward, relinquishing Cassian's hand. The bond stretched between them, but it held firm. She touched her scar, feeling the intricate lines of the old magic embedded in the tissue. "I bear the founder seal, burned into my flesh by a fire that should have claimed my life. I survived because my blood remembered what my mind had long forgotten." "How convenient," Caris sneered. "A scar is nothing more than a scar. Furnish us with proof or be justly judged a fraud." Lady Erebus rose, moving with a fluid, liquid grace. "Allow me to test her." If she is genuinely founder-blooded, she will withstand compulsion. She approached Era and the ambient temperature seemed to plummet. Look at me, child. Era met her eyes. They were silver, utterly fathomless and intensely hypnotic. Lady Erebus spoke, and her voice became layered, irresistibly compelling. Kneel and confess you are a fraud. Tell Lord Cassian he has squandered his house on a lie. The command slammed into Era's mind like a tidal wave. She felt her knees start to buckle. Felt the treacherous words rising to her lips. But that warm nexus in her chest, the bond, the oath, the deep-seated founder magic, pulled tight and she held her ground. No, she managed. A profound silence descended. Then Lady Erebus smiled faintly. Fascinating. Again. Kneel and formally forswear your claim. No. The vampire's smile broadened slightly. Extremely fascinating. One final time with the totality of my power. Kneel, forswear and renounce House Vale, or I will tear out your throat. Every survival instinct screamed at Era to obey. But she thought of Cassian, of the endless library lessons, of 3 days spent learning to be more than a scarred girl everyone pitied. She reached out through the bond, found Cassian's wellspring of strength and pulled. A cold, exhilarating power flooded her veins. She stood straighter, looked Lady Erebus directly in the eye and articulated clearly, No. I am founder-blooded. I resist your compulsion by right of blood and oath. I stand with House Vale. The cavern erupted in loud whispers. Lady Erebus stepped back, an expression akin to respect in her silver eyes. She is genuine. The resistance is too clean to be anything else. I acknowledge her blood. Lord Nick stood next. I shall also test her. With your permission, Lady Erebus? Granted. He approached Era and this time the compulsion was different. Not commands but seductive visions. She saw herself departing the Undercoft, walking into true sunlight, forgetting Cassian, living a safe, ordinary life. It was beautiful, tempting, and utterly false. A good attempt, Era said, forcefully shattering the vision. But I have already lived the safe life. It brought me no joy. Lord Nix let out a genuine, amused laugh. By the old dark, she possesses true steel in her spine. I acknowledge her blood as well. One by one the House Lords subjected her to their tests. Lady Moira attempted to read her fate and found it obscured by the founder magic. Lord Ananke tried to bind her with a sense of necessity and found she could refuse. Lord Kronos tried to manipulate her perception, making minutes feel like agonizing hours, and she endured it without flinching. Only Caris refused to test her. He remained seated on his throne, radiating cold fury. This proves nothing, he spat. So she resists compulsion. That does not grant Vale the right to restore his house. It certainly does not erase his family's original crimes. What crimes? Cassian demanded, his voice ringing across the cavern. Name them. Show proof. Your father broke a blood oath. He revealed house secrets to mortals. He endangered all vampire kind. Lies. All of it. Cassian's voice was sharp. My father upheld every oath. Your accusations were complete fabrications designed to justify genocide, and now you are attempting to silence me again because I have achieved what you feared most, locating a founder-blooded mortal and restoring the balance. Caris rose and the temperature in the Undercoft plummeted dramatically. Be careful, Cassian. You are dangerously close to issuing a direct challenge. Then consider yourself challenged, Cassian said softly. I invoke the right of house trial. You accuse House Vale of breaking faith. I accuse House Caris of murder, false testimony, and attempted unlawful claiming. Let the court decide the truth. The cavern fell into a thick, absolute silence. Era felt her heart hammering against her ribs. House trial. Cassian had explained it. A formal duel governed by ancient rules where the victor's claim was accepted as absolute truth. It was almost always fatal. Accepted, Caris sneered, his smile as sharp as knives. Tomorrow at midnight. Traditional rules, to first blood or true death. Challenger's choice. The court will witness to true death, Cassian declared, and Era felt his terrible final certainty through the bond. One of us ends this. They abandoned the Undercoft in an oppressive silence, ascending the seemingly endless staircase with the devastating weight of tomorrow's trial heavy upon them. Era's legs were trembling with sheer exhaustion by the time they reached the surface, but Cassian showed no sign of fatigue. He moved like a contained tempest, all his formidable deadly power held in check by sheer will. The carriage awaited them. They climbed inside without speaking, and as the horses pulled them through the dark streets toward Cassian's estate, Era finally broke the quiet. You are going to fight him. Yes. To the death. Yes. And if you lose? The words caught in her throat. Cassian turned from the window to face her. In the dim interior light, his face was a stark study of shadow and sharp bone structure. If I lose, you run. The bond will guide you to safety. There is a failsafe built into founder oaths. You will have 3 days of absolute protection, enough time to reach neutral territory. I don't want to run, she insisted. I understand why you must do this, why you accepted the challenge, but don't tell me to run. Don't make plans that don't involve both of us surviving. Something flashed in Cassian's expression, surprise, perhaps a flicker of hope, but it vanished before she could fully interpret it. Caris possesses 5 centuries of combat experience. He survived 3 house wars and countless duels. I have spent the last 15 years hiding, avoiding conflict, staying invisible. The odds are not in my favor. Then we change the odds. Era leaned forward. You've taught me vampire law and court protocols. Now teach me about vampire combat. There must be rules, limitations, things we can exploit. You cannot assist me during the trial. It is single combat witnessed by the court. No interference is permitted. But I can help you prepare. She reached across the space between them and took his cold hand. You said the bond lets me draw on your strength. Does it work the other way? Can you draw on mine? Cassian stared at their joined hands. In theory, yes. Founder oaths were designed for reciprocal exchange. But human strength is limited. Anything you could offer me wouldn't be a significant advantage. What about human will? Human determination? Era squeezed his hand firmly. You've spent 15 years surviving, Cassian. That is not the same as truly living, and it's certainly not the same as fighting. But I've spent the last 3 days learning that I am more than what happened to me. That this scar, she touched her face with her free hand, doesn't define me unless I allow it to. Maybe that's what you need. Not just power, but a reason to win instead of just trying not to lose. The carriage turned onto the long drive leading to the estate. Through the window, Era watched the Gothic towers rise against the stars, dark and imposing, yet somehow less lonely than when she had first seen them. You are remarkable, Cassian said quietly. Do you realize that? Most humans would have shattered by now, fled screaming from the court, from me, from all of this. But you are sitting here, calculating how to help me win an impossible fight. It's not impossible. Difficult, perhaps, but not impossible. Era felt the bond humming between them, that steady, constant awareness of his presence. Besides, I have a vested interest in your survival. If you die, I am marked for death by House Caris. Enlightened self-interest. Cassian genuinely laughed, the sound filling the carriage with unexpected warmth. Enlightened self-interest. I will make sure to remember that when I am facing Caris across the dueling ground. They reached the house. Cassian helped her descend, his hand lingering on hers a fraction longer than necessary. The night was cold and clear, and Era could see her breath misting in the air, while Cassian breathed nothing at all. Inside, the house felt subtly altered. Less like a tomb, more like home, almost. Era realized with a start that she had grown accustomed to the dusty grandeur, the empty rooms, the silence broken only by their voices debating law, magic, and survival. I should let you rest, Cassian said, but he made no move toward the stairs. I'm not tired. It was a lie, she was utterly exhausted, but the thought of lying awake, paralyzed by worry, was unbearable. Show me where you will fight. Tell me the rules. Let me understand what you are facing. Cassian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Come. He led her back down into the depths of the house, past the ritual chamber to another door she had not previously noticed. Beyond it lay a circular arena carved from stone, roughly 30 feet across, with complex symbols etched into the floor and walls. Every old house maintained a dueling ground, Cassian explained, for settling disputes, testing warriors, conducting trials. House Vales hasn't been used since the Purge, but the wards still hold. He stepped into the center of the circle, and the etched symbols flared with a pale light. Traditional combat rules are simple. No weapons except those bonded to your blood. No magic except what flows through the oath marks you bear. No outside assistance. First blood ends a trial of honor. True death ends a trial of justice. What does bonded to your blood mean? Every house lord carries a blade bound to their bloodline. It cannot be disarmed. It cannot be wielded by another. Mine is. He extended his hand, and shadows coalesced in his palm, shaping into a long dagger with a blade that seemed to absorb light. Shadow forged. Created when I was sworn as Vale's heir. It remembers every oath I've taken, Every promise I've kept. Era circled him slowly, studying the dagger, beautiful in a horrifying way like frozen midnight. What will Caris have? A sword most likely. House Caris favors heavy blades, weapons designed to end fights swiftly. Cassian's expression darkened. He will attempt to overwhelm me with speed and raw power, forcing me into mistakes. He has fought this way for centuries. He knows every trick. Then don't fight his way. Era stopped directly in front of him. You said House Vale was about twilight, the space between. Don't try to match his strength. Use what makes you different. And what makes me different? You've spent 15 years learning to survive without a house, without resources, without backup. You've become something he can't predict. A vampire who thinks like a human, who adapts instead of relying solely on ancient power. She met his eyes. He is fighting for dominance. You are fighting for survival. That's different. That makes you dangerous in ways he won't expect. Cassian stared at her, and through the bond, Era felt a tangible shift. A loosening, a releasing of old rigid expectations. Say that again. You're dangerous in ways he won't expect. No, before that. That I think like a human. Well, don't you? After 15 years alone, dealing with mortals, staying hidden, you've had to adapt to learn their perspective. She paused, realization dawning. That's it, isn't it? That's the advantage. You can fight like a human, unpredictable, creative, willing to break patterns. House Vale was always the bridge between mortal and immortal. Cassian's voice was distant, thoughtful. We understood both worlds. My father always said that was both our strength and our weakness. We could see all sides, which made us mediators, but also vulnerable to those who saw only one path. Caris only knows vampire thinking, vampire pride. He'll expect you to fight with honor, to follow old patterns. Era felt a surge of excitement. But what if you don't? What if you fight dirty? The court won't fault you. They want a good spectacle. They want to see if you are worthy of restoration. Prove you are by winning however you can. She grabbed his free hand, the one not holding the shadow blade. Teach me the rules. All of them. Every technicality, every loophole. We have until midnight tomorrow. Let's find every legal advantage you can exploit. For the first time since they had left the Undercoft, Cassian smiled. A genuine smile lit with hope. You're terrifying, Alara Thorn. Has anyone ever told you that? Not recently. Now stop complimenting me and start teaching. They spent the remaining night in the dueling ground. Cassian explained the rules while Era took notes, her mind racing through possibilities. She learned that no outside assistance meant direct interference, but information gained before the trial was entirely fair game. She learned that bonded weapons could be enhanced by the wielder's blood, but at a severe cost of strength. Most importantly, she confirmed that Cassian was stronger than he realized. His 15 years of survival had honed instincts that 5 centuries of house privilege could never rival. He was faster, more adaptable, and more willing to think 3 moves ahead instead of relying on brute force. You can win this, Era said as the first light of dawn filtered through the high windows. Not easily, not safely, but you can win. Cassian had shed his formal coat hours ago, working through combat forms in his shirt sleeves. He paused now, breathing unnecessarily hard, a mortal habit he'd never entirely abandoned, and looked at her. I haven't felt this alive in 15 years. That's your doing. The bond, yes, but also just you. The way you refuse to surrender, refuse to accept defeat. It's infectious. Good. Era stood from the arena's edge. Because we are not finished. You need to rest, or whatever vampires do instead of sleeping. And I need to prepare. Prepare for what? I will be at the trial in the court gallery, which means I will be surrounded by vampires who either want you dead or simply don't care if you die. She smiled grimly. I may not be able to help directly, but I can make sure no one interferes from the outside. I can watch for treachery, and if it comes down to it, I can draw on the bond to give you strength when you need it most. That could hurt you, damage you permanently. Then we will ensure you don't need it until the very, very end. She crossed the arena to stand before him. They were close now, close enough that she could see the faint silver threads in his eyes, feel the cold radiating from him like winter given form. Cassian, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If you get the chance to kill Caris, take it. Don't hesitate. Don't offer mercy. He will not give you a second chance. Something dark flickered across Cassian's face. That's not who I am. I am not an assassin. No, you're not. You're a survivor. And sometimes survival means doing hard things. She placed her palm over his heart, or where his heart would be if it still beat. I don't want you to become a monster, But I also don't want you dead because you hesitated. Promise me you'll do what's necessary. Cassian covered her hand with his, pressing it against his chest. I promise. His grip tightened. But if something goes wrong, if Caris finds a way around the rules or if the other houses turn against me, I need you to promise you'll run. Take the bond's protection and get to neutral territory. If you refuse, I will die knowing I failed to protect you, and that will be worse than any death Caris could give me. His eyes held hers, intense and burning. Please. Promise me. Era wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in his expression, felt it through the bond. Not fear of death but the terror of failing her. All right. If it is hopeless, if there is no other way, I'll run. But only if it's truly hopeless. I'm not giving up while there is still a chance. Fair enough. Cassian released her hand, stepping back. You must rest. Truly rest. The trial begins at midnight, but we need to arrive early. The court will inspect the dueling ground, set wards, establish witnesses. What time is it now? Nearly dawn. You have maybe 12 hours. He gestured toward the door. I'll wake you when it's time. Era climbed the stairs slowly, exhaustion finally catching up. But as she reached her room, she paused. Through the bond, she could feel Cassian still in the dueling ground, running through combat forms, preparing himself mentally. She sent a thought through the connection. Nothing complicated, just a feeling. I believe in you. The response was immediate, wrapped in cold determination and something warmer she couldn't quite identify. That makes one of us. Era smiled and finally went to bed. The Undercoft was utterly transformed. Where it had once been arranged for social and diplomatic court business, it was now configured exclusively for combat. The heart of the vast cavern had been cleared, revealing a dueling circle carved directly into the stone floor and inlaid with gleaming silver that shone fiercely under the cold witchlight. 7 imposing thrones ringed the circle, and behind them, tiered seating rose into shadow, where hundreds of anticipation-filled vampires waited. Era stood in the gallery, the section reserved for housebound mortals and honored guests, surrounded by beautiful predators who watched her with barely suppressed curiosity. She wore the midnight blue dress, her hair pulled back to fully expose her scar. Let them look. Let them see her for what she was, scarred, mortal, and utterly unafraid. Cassian stood at the north point of the silver circle, clad in formal combat attire, dark, silver-reinforced leather fitting close to his body to ensure freedom of movement. His shadow blade hung at his hip, and his face was a mask of cold concentration. Yet, through the bond, Era felt his electric nerves, his deep-seated fear, and his absolute determination. Caris stood at the south point, resplendent in crimson and black, carrying a massive, heavy sword that looked capable of cleaving a man in two. He was smiling, confident, and relaxed, 5 centuries of relentless victory evident in his arrogant stance. Lady Moira stood between them, her voice cutting through the cavern with supernatural clarity. We are assembled to witness a trial of blood between House Caris and House Vale. The challenge: Lord Cassian Vale accuses Lord Caris of murder, false testimony, and unlawful claiming. Lord Caris denies all charges and counteraccuses House Vale of oath-breaking and endangering vampire kind. As is tradition, the victor's claim shall be accepted as truth. The trial is to true death. Only one leaves this circle alive. She paused, allowing the terrible weight of the words to settle. Combatants, state your oaths. Caris spoke first, his voice ringing with terrifying power. By House Caris, by blood and bone, by death eternal, I swear to uphold our laws and destroy this pretender who dares challenge our justice. Cassian's voice was quieter but no less intense. By House Vale, by Twilight's promise, by the oaths of the founding, I swear to prove the truth and end the tyranny of lies. Then let the trial commence. Lady Moira raised her hand, and the silver circle flared with light. No magic but what you carry. No weapons but what you are bonded to. No mercy but what you choose to grant. The court bears witness. She dropped her hand. Caris moved first, crossing the circle in a blinding blur of speed. His sword swept down in an arc that should have split Cassian from shoulder to hip. But Cassian wasn't there. He had rolled expertly aside, coming up with his shadow blade extended, aiming for Caris's exposed side. Caris spun, blocked, and the 2 blades met with a sound like thunder striking stone. The impact sent shockwaves through the arena, and Era felt Cassian's arm go numb through the bond. He was outmatched in sheer raw strength. They both knew it. But strength wasn't everything. Cassian gave ground, allowing Caris to press him, drawing him into a predictable rhythm. Strike, block, retreat. The older vampire smiled, clearly believing he was dominating. But Era could see the truth. Cassian was meticulously studying Caris's rhythm, learning his preferences, finding the ingrained patterns in 5 centuries of combat habit. Caris struck high. Cassian ducked low and cut across the vampire's thigh. First blood, but not enough to matter. The shallow wound instantly sealed, and Caris laughed contemptuously. Is that the best you can offer, little Vale? Your father fought better than this before I killed him. Era felt a searing spike of rage through the bond. Cassian's control wavered for a single moment, and that was enough. Caris pressed his advantage, his crimson-tinged steel a blur. Cassian blocked, parried, and retreated steadily toward the edge of the circle. The crowd began to murmur, this wouldn't be a prolonged fight. Caris would simply wear Cassian down, force an irreversible error, and end it. Don't fight his way. Era thought fiercely through the bond. Remember what makes you different. She felt Cassian's acknowledgement, a sharp flash of understanding. Then he did the utterly unexpected. He dropped his blade. The crowd gasped. Caris hesitated, sword raised, confusion replacing his confidence. What are you doing? Fighting like a Vale, Cassian said, and he dove forward, sliding directly under Caris's guard. What followed was not elegant. Cassian fought like a street brawler, like someone who had spent 15 years doing whatever it took to survive. He aimed for eyes, throat, and joints, vulnerable points that honorable vampire combat traditionally avoided. He used his smaller size to his advantage, slipping inside Caris's reach where the massive sword was utterly useless. Caris stumbled back, genuinely shocked. He tried to swing his blade, but Cassian was already moving, shadows wrapping around his hands like intricate gauntlets. He struck Caris's wrist, and the sword clattered free onto the stone. Illegal, someone shrieked from the gallery. He's using shadow magic. His blade is shadow-forged. Lady Erebus called back coolly. The magic is bonded to him. That falls within the rules. Caris's expression had twisted from confidence to blistering fury. He lunged at Cassian, fangs extended, clearly intending to rip out his throat. But Cassian twisted aside, seized Caris's extended arm, and used the vampire's own momentum to violently throw him across the circle. Caris crashed into the silver boundary and screamed. The wards instantly flared, burning where he touched them. He rolled away, smoke rising from his back. When he stood, absolute murder blazed in his eyes. You fight like a coward. Caris snarled. I fight to win, Cassian corrected, having retrieved his shadow blade, holding it low and ready. You've spent centuries relying on power and intimidation. I've spent 15 years learning that the only way to beat a stronger opponent is to refuse to play by their rules, then die like a rule breaker. Caris's hands erupted with crimson light, death magic, explicitly forbidden in the Undercoft, but he was clearly past caring about rules. He hurled it at Cassian in a wave of destructive power. The arena's wards should have contained it. Should have blocked death magic as they had earlier attempts at lethal force. But Caris had planned this. Era realized with blinding horror that he had somehow corrupted the wards, seeded them with his power during the earlier inspection. The death magic slammed into Cassian and he went down hard. Through the bond, Era felt the pain, excruciating, overwhelming. She gasped, her own chest burning in agonizing sympathy. Foul? Lord Nyx was instantly on his feet. Caris has violated trial law. Disqualify him. Lady Moira demanded. But Caris was already moving toward Cassian's fallen form, his blade back in his hand raised for the killing blow. No. Era thought. No, this does not end like this. She reached through the bond with every fiber of her being, not just calling for Cassian's strength, but furiously offering her own. Her fleeting mortality, her indomitable human determination, her absolute refusal to let him die. The connection blazed open and she felt raw power surge between them, human warmth meeting vampire cold. Cassian's eyes snapped open. As Caris's blade descended, Cassian rolled aside, sprang up with terrifying speed, and drove his shadow blade up through Caris's guard, through his ribs and straight into his heart. The cavern fell into a moment of absolute silence. Caris staggered back, staring down at the blade embedded in his chest with bewildered disbelief. I had help, Cassian said quietly. From someone who understands what it means to survive against impossible odds. From someone who refused to let me fight alone. He twisted the blade and Caris screamed. And I had justice on my side. Your accusations were lies. My house died for nothing. But it won't stay dead. He pulled the blade free. Caris collapsed, the mighty Lord of Death sinking to his knees in the center of the silver circle. Blood black as midnight pooled around him. House Vale claims victory. Cassian's voice sliced through the stunned silence. I demand Caris's confession before he dies. Let the court hear the truth from his own lips. Caris laughed, a wet, choking sound. You think you've won? House Caris has 50 vampires waiting outside. They'll tear you apart the moment you leave here. Then it is fortunate that I am not leaving. Cassian raised his voice. Lady Moira, Lord Nyx, Lady Erebus, I invoke the right of sanctuary. House Vale requests protection under court law while we petition for full restoration. Granted. Lady Moira declared immediately. Under the circumstances, the court finds in favor of House Vale. Lord Cassian, your accusations are accepted as proven. House Caris will be immediately investigated for trial, fraud, murder, and conspiracy. All claims against mortals bearing the Caris mark are hereby suspended pending review. Caris tried to object, but blood choked his mouth. He collapsed forward, and his body instantly began to dissolve into ash, the final, irreversible true death. The court erupted in chaos. Some vampires cheered, others protested furiously. But Cassian just stood there, covered in ash and blood, looking up at the gallery where Era was already pushing through the crowd to reach him. She met him at the circle's edge. He stepped over the silver boundary, and she threw her arms around him, not caring that he was cold and bloody and that hundreds of powerful vampires were watching. You did it, she whispered against his chest. You actually did it. We did it, Cassian corrected, his arms coming around her, holding her tightly. I felt you through the bond at the end. You gave me everything. You could have died. But I didn't, and neither did you. That's what matters. She pulled back just enough to look at his face. What happens now? Cassian glanced around the Undercoft, at the assembled houses, at the 7 thrones, at the world that had rejected him 15 years ago and now had no choice but to accept him back. Now we rebuild, he said. For real this time. House Vale rises from ash and twilight and we do it right. Both of us. Era asked. Both of us, Cassian confirmed. Then, in front of the entire court, he genuinely smiled. If you'll have me, that is. The oath binds me to protect you. But everything else, partnership, trust, what we build together, that is your choice. Era looked at him, ancient, deadly, wounded, and hopeful. She thought about 3 days of intense lessons, nights in the library, a bond that connected them deeper than anything she had ever known. Ask me again in a week, she said, when we're both less exhausted and covered in ash. But for now, yes, both of us. Lord Caris's dying threat, that 50 armed vampires from House Caris are waiting outside, is the most immediate and deadly challenge. The siege. Cassian wisely invoked Sanctuary, which legally protects him, Era, and House Vale inside the Undercoft. However, the House Caris loyalists will not disperse. They will immediately lay siege to the abandoned church and the Undercoft entrance. Cassian and Era are now trapped inside with the rest of the Night Court. Court protection is temporary. The neutral houses, Moira, Nyx, Erebus, etc., will honor the Sanctuary, but they won't fight Cassian's war for him. They will quickly tire of the siege and pressure Cassian to resolve the conflict. He must find a way to neutralize the remaining Caris forces without violating the Sanctuary and without outside help, which could be extremely difficult while exhausted and trapped. The scapegoat. The surviving House Caris members will likely blame Era for the defeat, as her intervention via the bond was the turning point. She becomes an even higher value target for a blood vendetta. With Lord Caris dead and the house stripped of its legitimacy, the court has ordered an investigation into the massive charges of fraud and murder. Cassian and Vale are now expected to be the primary beneficiaries and administrators of the transition. Political vacuum. Caris's death leaves a powerful house without a leader. The surviving members, including minor lords, captains and blood-bonded retainers, will either try to elect a new lord or scatter. Cassian must quickly move to legally claim and secure the Caris house seat, territory, and assets before another ambitious house, or a Caris loyalist, steps in. Uncertain loyalties. The 50 waiting vampires are just a fraction of the total House Caris population. The majority of Caris's vast resources, financial, magical, and territorial, and his non-combative vampires are scattered across Ashnir. Cassian must use the court's ruling to demand fealty from these remnants. Many will refuse, creating a vast network of new hidden enemies. The foundational lie. Caris's power was built on lies, as Cassian accused. Unraveling his network of fraud and conspiracy will be a massive undertaking that requires human-like investigation, exactly the unpredictable thinking Era praised, rather than brute vampire force. Cassian will need Era's unique perspective to sift through the legal and mortal aspects of Caris's criminal enterprise. The victory has given Cassian and Era the house, but they must immediately transition from survival to administration and defense against a massive, disorganized, but still dangerous foe. The Undercoft was chaos, yet inside the Silver Circle, an island of stillness held. Cassian and Era remained locked in an embrace of blood, sweat, and shared relief, while the other House Lords debated furiously over the disposition of Caris's vast, fallen empire. Cassian was the first to pull back. He was streaked with ash and blood, his formal clothes torn, but his shadow blade was clean and sheathed. "We have to move," he murmured, his voice tight. Caris was right. His loyalists won't wait for a formal investigation. They'll execute us the moment Sanctuary is lifted. "You invoked Sanctuary, which means we're trapped," Era replied, her mind racing despite the exhaustion. "And House Caris is waiting outside. What's the immediate legal loophole?" Cassian glanced at the House Lords. Lady Moira was already giving orders to court retainers, her black eyes sharp with opportunism. "Caris's defeat is not enough. We need to destroy their command structure, the source of their loyalty. And we need to do it without leaving this room." He spotted Lord Nyx, the Lord of Night, who was watching them with an expression of intense curiosity. Nyx was a neutral power, respectful of the old laws. "Lord Nyx," Cassian called out, stepping toward the center of the arena. "House Vale has proven its restoration and Caris's treachery. Caris claimed to have 50 vampires waiting outside, ready to commit sedition against the court itself. I cannot leave Sanctuary, but I demand the court fulfill its duty, secure the assets of House Caris before they commit treason." Lord Nyx paused, his youthful face thoughtful. "A reasonable demand, Lord Vale. But how do we identify the command structure of a disgraced house in time?" Era stepped forward, placing a hand on Cassian's bloody leather-clad arm. The action, bold and intimate, drew all eyes back to the mortal girl. "House Caris's power didn't come from ancient blood, it came from mortal business," Era stated, her voice clear. "We found records of Caris's fraudulent claims, his network of stolen properties and illegal enterprises. The vampires outside won't be awaiting orders from a dead lord. They'll be looking for his chief administrator, the one who controls the money. That is the one who leads the 50. Cassian's eyes met hers, realizing her plan. He turned back to Nyx. Lord Caris was building his power through illicit financial manipulation, a violation of the law of coexistence. Era's founder blood can read the truth of financial oaths and claims. I demand the immediate seizure of Caris's ledger, and I offer my bound mortal to authenticate the true conspirator to the court. It was a brilliant gamble. It used Era's unique founder talent, oath-sensing/truth reading, bypassed the physical siege outside, and forced the court to accept her human insight as legal proof. Lady Moira smiled, a slow, predatory unveiling of perfect teeth. "A fascinating proposal. If the mortal girl can name the conspirator, the court will grant you command of the resources necessary to neutralize that threat." A court retainer was dispatched to secure the ledger from Caris's seat. Within minutes, the heavy, iron-bound book was brought to the center of the arena. Era, ignoring the grime, laid her hands on the cold leather. She focused, reaching for the truth woven into the promises and transactions within. The script writhed, and the meaning flowed into her mind, not in words, but in a flood of names and betrayals. "The conspirator is Lord Varian," Era announced, lifting her head. "A minor blood of Caris, but he managed the mortal finances. He knows the location of the reserves and holds the loyalty of the mercenaries outside. He is currently not here. He is at the main Caris estate, preparing to use the siege as a cover to loot the treasury and assume command." The revelation stunned the room. Caris's backup plan hadn't been a direct counterattack, but a hidden betrayal orchestrated by a subordinate. "The siege is a diversion," Cassian said, stepping up to the center. "My lord and lady colleagues, if you allow Varian to consolidate Caris's power, you risk a civil war that will shatter the law of the founding entirely. House Vale will handle the siege and claim its assets, but we require a brief extension of Sanctuary and the court's formal mandate to execute Lord Varian on sight for sedition." The House Lords debated for a tense minute, their voices low and dangerous. Finally, Lady Moira delivered the verdict. "Lord Cassian Vale, the court grants you emergency mandate. Execute Lord Varian, secure House Caris assets, and disperse the loyalist siege. You have 24 hours. The right of Sanctuary is suspended." The air in the Undercoft immediately changed, the magical protection dissolving. Cassian turned to Era, his eyes blazing with a mixture of exhaustion and cold resolve. We're no longer trapped. But we're exposed and we have less than a day to take over an entire house. Good, Era said, meeting his gaze. She finally felt a fierce, satisfying sense of purpose. She had won the game of law and Cassian had won the duel of blood. Now came the final shared challenge. Then let's go. We have a house to dismantle and another to rebuild. Cassian gave a grim nod. He took her hand, the bond humming between them, a connection of magic, life and newly forged partnership. Together, the disgraced lord and the scarred founder-blooded mortal, they walked out of the Undercoft, ready to face the first dawn of House Vale restored.